Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Deception was just another layer to cover the betrayal. "Honey, what's wrong? What happened?" Patricia Brown asked as her daughter Mary rushed into their home in tears. Patricia immediately embraced her, soothing her by patting her back with one hand and running her fingers through her hair. "He's gone, Mom!" Mary cried out. "Daniel's gone!" Her voice cracked as she pulled away from her mother, handing over an envelope to her father, Michael, with trembling hands. Patricia held her daughter close again, trying to calm her down. Michael took the envelope but paused before opening it. "Mary, where's William?" he asked, concerned. "He's at Daniel's place," Mary managed between sobs. "I shouldn't have driven like this with him." Her body trembled as she spoke. Earlier that day, Daniel had taken their youngest, James, to Michael and Patricia's house, asking them to watch over him because he had an errand with William. But within a couple of hours, Mary had called her parents, nearly hysterical, after receiving divorce papers at work. Now she sat on their couch, tears streaming down her face, with her mother holding her tightly. Michael, seated in a chair nearby, opened the envelope and began reading the legal document inside. A heavy silence hung in the room as Michael read the petition for divorce. His face darkened as he shook his head. No warning, no conversation. Daniel had blindsided Mary with legal papers, serving them to her at work in an act that left her shocked and humiliated. As he continued to read, his brow furrowed deeper. "Mary, he's filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery." "What? No!" Mary exclaimed, her voice filled with a mix of outrage and pain. "He's convinced himself I was cheating with someone at work, but I never did. I would never cheat on Daniel. I love him." Her words came out in broken sobs, her desperation palpable. Michael clenched his jaw, thinking angrily, "I'll destroy him for this. Making up lies to paint Mary as the villain. He's probably the one who's been unfaithful." He continued reading the petition, and his eyebrow raised in disbelief, a telltale sign of his frustration. "What made Daniel think you were unfaithful?" Michael asked, his eyes narrowing. Mary shifted uncomfortably, glancing between her father and mother. "I don't know," she said, her voice quieter now. "Maybe I hugged one of our sales guys when he closed a big deal." Her tone was tentative, as though she were trying to make sense of it herself. Michael studied his daughter, his expression unreadable. "Just a hug?" he pressed. Mary hesitated, then admitted, "There was more. One time after work at happy hour, a coworker kissed me. I'd had too much to drink, but as soon as I realized what was happening, I pushed him away. That's it, Dad. Nothing else happened. I swear." Her words tumbled out in a rush, and her hands twisted the tissue in her lap. Michael's eyebrows shot up again, a reaction that did not go unnoticed by Patricia. "What are you getting at, Michael?" she asked sharply, irritation creeping into her voice. "Are you trying to accuse our daughter of something?" "No, not yet," Michael responded, though his voice was measured. "But we've known Daniel for, 7 or 8 years now? I work with him every day. This isn't like him at all. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on in his head." "I'll tell you what's going on," Patricia snapped, glaring at her husband. "He's full of it. And after what he's done to our daughter, you're actually questioning her?" She passed Mary a box of tissues as the pile of used ones grew on the coffee table. "How can you even think of siding with him after this?" "I'm not taking sides until I've finished reading this," Michael said, his tone flat, though his eyes stayed on the divorce petition. "Mary, who exactly does he think you're having an affair with?" Mary wiped her face, pulling back from her mother's arms. "Oliver Smith," she answered, her voice small. "One of the sales reps at work. But I didn't. I think Daniel saw something and just misunderstood." Michael nodded slowly, absorbing her words. The room fell into a heavy silence, with the weight of accusations, misunderstandings, and emotions filling the air. "What could he have possibly seen?" Mary cried out again, her voice trembling. Michael's face, initially full of empathy and understanding, gradually hardened, his expression becoming cold and unreadable, something his wife, Patricia, often referred to as his stony face. His eyes stayed fixed on the papers he was reading. Daniel was requesting a 50-50 split of custody for their son William, naming himself as the custodial parent. With a stern look, Michael turned to face his daughter, the weight of the situation clear in his expression. But Daniel wasn't asking for anything related to James Oliver Roy. In fact, he wanted his name removed from James's birth certificate entirely and requested that James's last name be changed. This revelation left Patricia and Mary in shock, their disbelief palpable. Mary collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mary! Mary!" Michael raised his voice, attempting to cut through the chaos. Her cries ceased for a moment as she looked up at her father, her tear-streaked face showing desperation. Patricia watched her husband, concerned by his lack of warmth toward their daughter. "Daniel claims you cheated on him with Oliver Smith," Michael said firmly. "James's middle name is Oliver because you said you liked it. Now I'm asking you, Mary, did you cheat on Daniel with Oliver Smith?" The accusation hung in the air as Mary let out another wail, burying her face in her mother's embrace. Patricia, fed up with the confrontation, shot Michael a furious glare. "Can you stop this?" she hissed. Michael, unfazed, turned his icy gaze toward his wife. "Did you know?" he asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "What exactly was it that you knew?" Patricia's anger flared, but Michael remained calm, picking up the paper that had shattered their family's illusion. "This is why Daniel isn't fighting for custody of James," he said, holding up the DNA test. "It says here that the probability of Daniel being James's father is less than 0.002%. So, Patricia, how long have you known about this?" Decades of marriage had taught Patricia how to read her husband, and she could sense that their relationship was teetering on the edge of disaster. If she admitted that Mary had confided in her doubts about James's paternity, it could lead to the end of their marriage. But if she lied, and Michael found out, it would be over for sure. Patricia took a deep breath and made her choice. "I didn't know," she said quietly, her voice shaking. "This is the first time I've heard any of this. I think Mary is as shocked as we are." Michael's response was flat, almost emotionless. "I doubt that," he said. "But there's one way to settle this." His eyes darkened. "I want to see both of your phones. Now." Patricia shot up from her seat, her face flushing with anger as she pointed an accusing finger at her husband. "You are not invading our privacy," she spat. "You're not going through our phones." Michael stared at her, his expression unchanged. "People with nothing to hide nothing," he said slowly. "I assume you're hiding something, so let me make this clear. Either you both unlock your phones and hand them over right now, or I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow." Patricia's eyes narrowed into slits of fury. "I've never given you a reason not to trust me. We're not handing over our phones and we're not getting a divorce," she said, her voice laced with venom. Michael looked at her with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "I've caught you in little lies for years," he said quietly. "I let them slide because I thought the fights that would follow weren't worth it. But I'm ashamed of what I've tolerated, and now, seeing this, seeing our daughter try to deceive a man into raising someone else's child, well, that changes everything." His voice grew colder. "It's simple. Phones or divorce. If either of you thinks I'm bluffing, you're welcome to test me." For the first time, both Patricia and Mary glimpsed a side of Michael they had never seen, a man driven by a steely determination that wouldn't bend or break. Patricia, her face twisted with rage, screamed back at him, "It's not going to happen. I'll take you for everything in the divorce. I'll take everything you have, and you'll be lucky if you even have your car to sleep in." Michael stood up abruptly, throwing the papers onto the coffee table. His eyes swept over his wife and daughter before he turned away, shaking his head in disbelief as he walked towards the kitchen. Moments later he returned, this time holding a small plastic Ziploc bag. Gripping it by the corners, he used it as a makeshift glove to gather up the crumpled napkins scattered in front of Mary. With a practiced flick, he reversed the bag back to its original state, sealing the napkins inside with a snap of his fingers along the zipper. Patricia, her voice escalating into a near scream, demanded, "What do you think you're doing?" Her hands trembled with rage, pointing accusingly at the bag in his hand. In nearly 3 decades of marriage, Michael had never faced this fiery side of her. For the first time, he questioned whether he truly knew his wife at all. "I'm going to ask Daniel who he used for that DNA test when he found out James wasn't his son. Then, I'm going to get my own test to find out if Mary is even mine, or if you've been lying to me for almost 30 years. Patricia let out a shriek and lunged at him, her nails clawing viciously at his face. It's impossible to truly understand the sensation of losing your breath until it happens to you. It's a phrase people throw around, but the reality is far more terrifying. When the air is forced out of your lungs, panic takes hold instantly. The absence of oxygen creates a sheer terror, as if you're moments away from death. Those seconds before your lungs refill stretch into what feels like eternity, as your body fights desperately for breath. Despite the decades that had passed, Michael still remembered the karate lessons he took as a teenager. Though over 40 years had gone by, the muscle memory remained. As Patricia's nails raked his skin, Michael struck her solar plexus with an open palm, not hard enough to leave a mark, but with enough force to knock the wind out of her. Patricia collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air in a state of panic, her hands clutching her throat. As Patricia struggled to breathe, Mary's panic intensified, watching her mother's frantic attempts to draw in air. Meanwhile, Michael remained calm. He knew she'd recover within a minute, and he wasn't going to waste any time. He quickly moved to his office at the back of the house, aware that once Patricia regained her breath, things would escalate further. Grabbing his MacBook Air and iPad, he logged into the Wi-Fi router and swiftly changed the password. Patricia, who only ever used her phone for social media, would be cut off from their banking and other accounts without Wi-Fi. Without hesitation, Michael packed a few changes of clothes into his backpack and walked out of the house. He passed Patricia, who was sitting on the floor, still gasping but slowly regaining control of her breath. As he stepped out, he left behind 30 years of what once seemed like a perfect marriage. He drove straight to a nearby McDonald's, where he connected to their Wi-Fi and opened Safari. Michael logged into their joint American Express account, paid off the balance, and closed the card. Next, he accessed their Chase account, cleared the remaining balance, and wrote a check to himself from their joint account for half of the remaining funds. Years ago, he had registered his landscaping business as a payee, preparing for a moment like this. As he finished his financial cleanup, Michael received a call. It was Damian Roy. "Michael," Damian said, his voice steady and emotionless. "Damian," Michael responded, recognizing the voice of his daughter's soon-to-be ex-father-in-law. "What a mess this is, huh?" "It couldn't be worse," Damian replied, opening the door for Michael as he arrived at the Roy residence. "Let's go sit on the patio, watch the golfers." He offered a glass of bourbon. Damian's house overlooked the golf course of the country club, where both families had spent countless hours. Damian's wife had even won the women's championship 4 years running, something Damian took great pride in. Sitting on the patio, bourbon in hand, Michael broke the silence. "How's Daniel holding up?" Damian tilted his head slightly as if to say, "You really want to ask that?" Michael sighed. "Yeah, dumb question. What he's going through. There's not much worse than that, is there? Except for losing a child." He trailed off. "But that's exactly what's happening," Damian interjected quietly. "He's losing his youngest son, and you're losing your youngest grandson." Michael stared into his glass. How could Mary do this to him? What happened to her? Damian shook his head. "She was always spoiled, and instead of confronting it, you let it slide. Now we're all paying for it. It seems I bear as much responsibility as anyone else for this mess." Damian gave a slight shrug. "Maybe, but that's doubtful. She's an adult, capable of making her own choices and owning up to them." Michael nodded in silent agreement, taking a slow sip of his bourbon. "Where is Daniel hiding? And I assume William's with him?" Michael asked. "They're at the lake house. Daniel doesn't want to face Mary, and William's too young to witness his mother unraveling like this. Thankfully, James is still too young to remember any of it," Damian replied. "James won't remember," Michael said softly. "But Daniel will. He was thrilled to have 2 sons. Now, all of this—" His voice faltered, and tears filled his eyes. Damien exhaled. I get it, man. Honestly, I don't want to see Mary or her mother either. I just found out my so-called loving wife knew all along that there was a possibility Daniel wasn't the boy's father, and she never said a word. Now I'm starting to think Mary's not even my daughter. I've abandoned Patricia, too. Damien shook his head. Good God. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, you say, hold my beer. Michael raised his glass in acknowledgement, a shared understanding passing between them. Damien continued, and as furious as I am, Sarah's beyond that. She's terrifying right now. Sarah Roy, Damien's wife of 32 years, had always been strong-willed, coming from a ranching family and excelling in sports through high school and college. Like her namesake, Sarah had been a star in both tennis and golf before becoming pregnant with Daniel and stepping away from a potential pro career. Damien shook his head. If it turns out Mary isn't William's mother, I think Sarah might have shot her. I've never seen her this angry. Michael sighed. Keep her under control, Damien. I don't want her getting in trouble because of those two unfaithful women. Things are bad enough as it is. I'm probably going to end up in jail. Damien raised an eyebrow. Wait, what? Jail? What the hell, Michael? Is that why you've got bandages on your face? Michael had stopped by a pharmacy on his way to Damien's to grab some ointment and patches for his face. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I grabbed Mary's used wipes to get a DNA test done, and when Patricia found out, she went after me. I hit her in the stomach in self-defense. Damien whistled, shaking his head. Jesus, Michael. Normally, I'd never condone hitting a woman, but if anyone ever deserved it, it's her. Michael nodded. I know they'll twist the story to make me the bad guy, so I'm probably getting arrested soon. That's why I came to talk to you. Can you reach out to Daniel? He'll need to manage things while I'm dealing with this. Daniel, Michael's son-in-law, not only worked for his landscaping company, but had also bought a 25% stake in the business. Damien nodded. Yeah, I'll get in touch with him. He's got a burner phone. I'll make sure you have the number. Their conversation was cut short when Sarah walked into the room, her gaze cold as she locked eyes on Michael. What's he doing here? She asked her husband, her voice icy. And why are the cops pulling into the driveway? Calm down, Sarah, Damien said. Michael's on Daniel's side. Turns out Patricia knew all about Mary's affair, and now there's a question whether James is even Daniel's son. Michael's left her. Before Damien could say anything more, the doorbell rang, and Sarah opened it to reveal the police. They stepped inside, glancing at Michael. I knew this was coming, Michael said with a resigned sigh, as he turned and allowed the officers to handcuff him. The police sat Michael down and asked for his version of events. He explained how Patricia had attacked him and showed them the scratches on his face. Though the officers were somewhat sympathetic, they remained detached. If you had called us when it happened, we might have arrested her instead of you, one of them said. I'll have Daniel get your lawyer involved, Damien said firmly. Sarah embraced Michael as the police finally released him. 6 months later, the bitterness that had engulfed their lives had mostly eased. Mary had initially resisted Daniel's attempts at divorce, insisting on counseling first, and when that was denied, she responded by imposing stringent conditions. A DNA test ultimately confirmed that Mary was indeed Michael's daughter, leaving him with conflicting emotions. Michael had always cared for Mary as his child, but he had long lost respect for her. Their relationship remained distant, and Michael doubted that would change. She also prevented him from seeing his grandson, James. Michael was eventually acquitted of a Class C misdemeanor assault charge against his wife, thanks to a photo from a drugstore that showed clear evidence of fingernail scratches on his face. Michael, meanwhile, was moving forward with his divorce from Patricia, a woman he no longer trusted or respected. Patricia, however, fought the divorce every step of the way, with her lawyers throwing up obstacles. This resistance might have continued indefinitely if not for a terrifying event. Patricia and Mary were attacked in a parking lot after leaving a nightclub together. Although they couldn't identify their assailant, security footage captured a small figure dressed entirely in black and wielding a thin metal rod, brutally assaulting the two women. The footage showed the steel bar bending under the force of the attack. From their hospital beds, Both Patricia and Mary claimed ignorance of their attacker's identity, suggesting that only Mary's husband, Daniel, had any possible motive. However, Daniel, standing 6'3" tall, was quickly ruled out due to the clear disparity in height. Despite an open investigation, the case grew cold, with no solid leads. Although the women sustained serious injuries, including broken bones and lost teeth, they were fortunate not to suffer permanent damage. They both stopped frequenting nightclubs and, growing increasingly paranoid, retreated into their homes where they began to bicker constantly. With no more resistance, the divorce process moved forward. Custody of William, Daniel, and Mary's son was decided as a 50-50th split, with Daniel being named the primary custodial parent. No child or spousal support was granted to either party. In addition, Daniel's name was removed from James's birth certificate, and DNA tests revealed that Oliver Smith was James's biological father. As a result, Oliver was ordered to pay child support to Mary. Following the revelation of his infidelity, Oliver's wife filed for divorce, citing adultery. He was ordered to pay not only child support for their 3 children, but also spousal support, as Oliver had insisted his wife be a full-time homemaker. These financial burdens plunged Oliver into poverty, a situation from which he was unlikely to recover. Daniel, however, managed to navigate the chaos of his unfaithful marriage with the steadfast support of his parents. He continued working with Michael and investing in their landscape business. William was a happy child for the most part, though he became visibly upset during the times he stayed at his mother's house with Patricia. His mother seemed constantly angry with his father or crying because she missed him. His grandmother, Patricia, appeared to harbor a never-ending rage, particularly directed at his grandfather, Michael. Michael's popularity with the single women at the country club only fanned the flames of Patricia's fury. Through it all, Damien and Sarah remained pillars of support for both their son and grandson. Sarah, despite the turmoil in their family, still managed to win the women's golf championship for the 5th year in a row, even with a few clubs missing from her set. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.